I'm gonna leave these with you in case anybody else comes in.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to the board meeting from the Huntsville Madison County Public Library board this evening. We're going to do things a little bit different this evening. We have a pretty extensive discussion planned in our governance committee report around the new regulations from the Alabama Public Library Service and Alabama Administrative Code. And then potential implications for our system. So we moved the public comment portion to after the business meeting. One, so the audience can hear that discussion. I don't know if that will impact the public comments or not. But wanted to do it that way. Sometimes we're getting comments, and then when we talk about things in the board meeting, sometimes we address them, sometimes we haven't. We just thought that would make more sense in terms of order. Also, we'll take up our first appeal of a committee decision regarding a statement of concern, and that will take place after the public comment section. So everybody has had an opportunity to review the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve? Motion to approve. Second? Second. All in favor? All right, the agenda is approved. We'll proceed to the approval of the minutes of the board meeting from May 21, 2024. Everyone has also received those in their packet and had an opportunity to review. Were there any changes or corrections? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve? Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. Brooke, we'll go ahead with the Library Foundation report, please.
Thank you. The Foundation's annual fee, Lily, is, just a reminder, is set for September 25th at the Jackson Center. There's going to be a reception and then a seated dinner, and our keynote author this year is J.T. Ellison, a thriller author out of Nashville. All the proceeds go right back to the library. And our goal this year is to raise roughly $90,000. A little bit of an increase from last year, but we're excited and we're looking good so far and very appreciative of every single person who has contributed thus far. The second thing is PNC Foundation has awarded the foundation a $10,000 grant to support Ready Readers, which is the literacy program for pre-K children, and they go out into the Title I stars and pre-Ks here, and so just wanted to kind of give the PNC Foundation big thanks. And obviously that $10,000 has gone right to the library to that program.
Is that everything? That's outstanding, thank you. Okay, we'll proceed to our Finance Committee report. Brad?
On the Finance Committee report, if you look at starting with page 8, you can see the report for financials. Overall, we're on target for this point of the year. Nothing really to note at this point in time. If you have questions, feel free to ask there. Similar format to our reports. The approval of extension for South Huntsville Library janitorial services starts on page 19. This is just waiting for approval.
So this was approved at the Finance Committee meeting on Friday afternoon. The Finance Committee recommends it for approval. It's the same contract that we had for the prior year with the same company. So since it came out of the Finance Committee, we don't need a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that contract is approved.
Next up, there's a change in the trustee for the retirement savings. Formerly a census is going to be Vanguard. No, I'm wrong, Vanguard. It's in the resolution there. But that's just a kind of administrative change on that one.
All right, that was also approved at the Finance Committee meeting, and so it comes out of committee with a recommendation for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that is approved as well. Melissa, you ready for the Governance Committee report?
So on page 23, is the schedule of 2025 closings. Kind of follows the same pattern as it has this year, with October 13th being Staff Appreciation Day, and otherwise the holidays and the closings reflected. So this is coming out of governance as a recommendation.
Anyone have any questions? Any discussion? Since it comes out of committee recommending approval, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's approved.
Okay, the next item is our statement of concern policy. We adopted this at our last meeting, and they're just, as we are kind of working through how the implementation of this, there have been a few things that have come up in terms of some additional changes. And let me note those. I'm beginning on page 24. The statement of concerns, each patron will be limited to filing no more than 3 statements of concern in a given year. The goal of this policy is not to allow just 1 or 2 folks just continue filing successive concerns, and so the limitation is 3 per year. During the review process, that the title will remain in the collection. The idea here is the presumption is going to be that the book is in the collection in the proper place, and it has the opportunity to challenge and to change that, but that it would remain available during that review. And then also kind of a reminder, it's in our collection development policy, but there's certain things that are in our collection that are hard copies, but there are others are digital content through Hoopla, Libby, Canopy, other things that are content aggregators who put these things together. So there are certain titles within those content aggregators that we don't really have the ability to change. And so it's kind of you're either in or out kind of thing. And so just a reminder in the statement of concern policy that there may be some limitations in terms of how the statement of concern may apply to the digital content. Then, as we're getting more statements of concern that are being filed, I believe right now we have 9 in process, 14 in process. It's a significant amount of time for our staff, and so we are actually extending the not only staff members, but also the Library Foundation board. Our board is the review. We can't be part of the initial review, but the Library Foundation board could be part of those initial reviews. And just kind of for context, we do, as you mentioned, Kevin, we have a statement of concern that's coming to us this afternoon. But you know, if you're looking at like listening to a book or whatever, I mean, these things can be between 5-10 hours each. So if we're asking our staff to come and review this, it's a significant lift. And so that's, again, this idea that we're extending the committee to include foundation board members. And then finally, if materials are challenged regarding a statement of concern, and if that is finalized, that decision will remain final for 3 years. And so again, the idea is once it's gone through the whole process, we can't turn right back around and have someone else challenge the same book. So those are the additional updates to the statement of concern policy coming from governance as a recommendation.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the changes to the statement of concern policy or any discussion? I mean, I'll just say, you know, I've said it at almost every meeting we've had over the last several months. We're constantly looking at policies. We are constantly working on policies and considering them, considering possible necessary changes. That process is going to continue. Whether there were changes to the HMPLC code or not, that process will continue. Certainly with those changes, it is continuing. So the idea of making the statement of concern available online was to make it easier for people to file those statements of concern, and we welcome that. But we're going to have to set some parameters because it really is taking a lot of time for our staff. And in the board, when things are challenged, there's a number of board members that try to read everything as well. So as I had to remind somebody, we're volunteers. We all have full-time day jobs. So we've got to try to squeeze all that in. And that's what most of these changes are designed to do, just to give us some more parameters around that process. Any other discussion? It came out of committee with a recommendation for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that is approved.
Okay, the next thing is, there's been a lot of discussion about the APLS rules, and so I kind of, these were adopted before our last meeting, but they were actually just finalized yesterday. And so, but we continue to kind of work through what does that look like for our library. And so, kind of, for the board, just stop me along the way, but kind of done a little bit of a deep dive onto what the rules are, what the changes are, what the implications are for our system. And so just again, there's been I've heard at least one suggestion that, you know, we're ignoring the APLS rules. That could not be any further from the truth. We are very cognizant of what these are and what these mean. So first of all, let's look at a timeline. So back in May, our governance committee approved our revised collection development policy and the statement of concern policies to be referred to the board. On the 16th of May, we got our first notice that APLS had adopted some proposed rules. On the 17th, our board packet was distributed that included the changed policies. And on the 21st, our board adopted our revised collection development policy and statement of concern policy. On May 31st, the rules from APLS were published. So that started the clock ticking for 45 days. On yesterday, the APLS rules were made final. So since that time, we have received some additional guidance from APLS about timelines. There's obviously a lot of questions about this. And so what does this look like? So in terms of adoption timetable, the deadline to submit new collection development policies that are aligned with the new rules is December 31st of this year. That would be to be eligible for an LTSA grant. Historically, our grants have been in the neighborhood of between $15,000 and $30,000 for LTSA. The deadline to submit new collection development policy that's aligned with the new rules to be eligible for continued state funding is June 30th of next year. So just in terms of just kind of giving some context for what our timeline is on these rules. So now let's look at specifically what the rules involve. I will tell you there's a lot of text on these slides, not what I always like to do, but so basically, in order to receive state aid, which in our system's situation is about just over $500,000 of state aid, a library a board must approve written policies for the library which cover the following. So material selection policies, including selection criteria for minors, and how they are safeguarded from sexually explicit or other material deemed inappropriate for children or youth. And so some of the questions that we've got to kind of work through in terms of how these apply to our policies. So what's the standard for determining what materials are inappropriate for children? What I might think is inappropriate for my child might be different than what someone else might be thinking is inappropriate for their child. And so how do we provide guidance to the library staff who's dealing with these issues every day on what is deemed inappropriate? And then who decides? Then HMPLC, in a FAQ document that they issued last month, kind of indicated that the rules should reflect community standards. Well, that's a step, in the right direction, but what does that look like for our community? Again, there's still some vagueness on what exactly, how do we determine what's inappropriate for children. The second part is to receive state aid, a library has to approve written policies, then requiring advance approval for materials recommended, displayed, or otherwise actively promoted to children or youth. So if you think about our library staff on a day-to-day basis, they are recommending books all the time. A student comes in and says, hey, I'm doing a report on the Vikings, can you point me in the right direction? Or, hey, I'm doing this book report on this book, can you point me in the right direction? And so it's kind of a little bit of a challenge to think through how they can continue to do their job of helping to provide resource and recommendations to students or children or youth if they have to have advance approval of everything that's being recommended. So the question is, does that limit them from being able to do just their day-to-day jobs? Well, what does that look like? Then even if the display themes that might be in a children or youth section are approved in advance, the books on display are intended to be checked out. And so when a book is checked out, how do you, you're dealing with the advance approval of replacing those books. Kind of working through that, maybe that's not as big of an issue as the recommendation language, but it's something that we have to think through, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis for our team?
One other thing that will affect is programming. So there's a lot of programming that we have in the libraries that are directed towards our youth, and so if we're going to be displaying a particular book or a particular subject matter that requires advanced notice. And so what does that timeline look like, and how early do we have to give that to whatever governing body is going to be reviewing that? How long will that take? Does that slow down our programming? We have a ton of different branches, and so programming at one branch is going to be different from another, and so it starts to become a little harder to figure out from a logistical standpoint as well.
And so sometimes it's like language that appears, you just have to think through how does it get applied? And that's, the devil's in the details, as they say. So next is, in order to receive state aid, the library board must approve policies that ensure that library sections designated for minors under the age of 18 remain free of material containing obscenity, sexually explicit, or other material deemed inappropriate for children. And so one of the challenges on this is 6 of our 10 branches are effectively one-room libraries. Everything is in the same room. So how do you sort of physically segregate collections, the children's section versus the adult section? What does that look like? How do we comply with this in a way that's, as someone said, you know, if you're standing in the children's section, but you turn around and there's, you know, adult fiction or whatever, are we gonna run against, up against these rules? So how do we work through this with our smaller branches? Some of our smaller branches have classroom space or programs or for computer labs. So are you talking about losing those spaces so you can relocate children's sections in there? What does that then do to branches? So those are some of the things, just kind of figuring out what are the implications of this and what does it mean for our system. The next section, which is really the same section but just another nuance on it, is that to have separate sections designated for minors. We talked a little bit earlier in our statement of concern policy about our digital content. And so that has become one of the fastest growing areas within our system. I'm a huge Hoopla user myself, but as you know, if you have a library card, you can access digital content. And you can set up an account on Hoopla or Libby. So how do we manage that with within the rules to provide distinct spaces where the minors will not be exposed to anything that's adult content? So how does it affect our digital platforms? Right now, anyone with a card can access the account or set up a Hoopla or Libby account. And so we're just kind of exploring what does this mean for our system, but that implication is pretty significant. I think we would have a lot of very concerned patrons if that digital content were to be affected. The next is interesting. Beyond the decision of where certain books can be placed within the library, this provision prevents the purchase of books that are advertised for consumers under the age of 18. So this would be a situation where if the publisher recommends a book for young adults, the young adult section, but our library system were to put it in the adult section, this provision says it can't even be in the library at all. So think of the implications of that for, there may be some books that are in a parenting section. They may have cartoons that parents could use to talk to their kids about sex ed or any number of things. But if it's advertised for consumers under the age of 18, this is preventing libraries from purchasing these materials. And so this is really, it's a burden to think through. Now library staff, in addition to seeing the contents in the right places, they have to determine whether the content is advertised for consumers under the age of 18 and advertised where, to who. Some of those questions are not answered. This is probably the most significant of all of the changes. That libraries must have separate restricted cards for minors under the age of 18 that require parental approval before a minor can check out materials in adult sections. So currently our juvenile cards are for patrons that are ages 16 and younger, and there are about just shy of 24,000 of these juvenile cards in our system, but the new rules require that basically a juvenile card or restricted card would apply to all patrons under the age of 18. So you imagine the library system's gonna have to somehow, create new cards for those patrons who are 17 and 18 and require parental approval. And so remember this, we're not talking just about parental approval of material with that's involving sex. It's any adult material. If you notice this provision, there's some exceptions in the prior provisions that talk about adult checkouts for history or religion or biology, that's not intended to be covered. That exception does not appear in this particular provision, which means that your senior in high school who is doing a book report on War and Peace now has to have a parent approve that checkout. That UAH student who comes as a young freshman and their parent lives in Georgia and they have a library card, they have to have a parent to approve them to check out that adult section. If your 10-year-old wants to check out a cookbook to make something for their dinner and they go to the adult section, a parent has to approve that checkout. Again, we're not just talking about sexual content, we're talking about anything that is placed in the adult section. There are about 200,000 items that will need to be updated in our system to be able to comply with this rule. The process itself is anticipated to take 6 to 8 months. Part of that is you can't do these updates in bulk. You can only do 200 books at a time. Do the math. That's a lot of edits that are going to have to happen. And there's a significant cost involved, the staff time to do this. And so again, as I mentioned, there was this caveat in two of the other provisions about age-appropriate materials regarding religion, history, biology, human anatomy shouldn't be construed against the rule. There was in other provisions and specifically left out of this one, which means any 17 and 8-year-old needs a parent to approve their checkouts. And that's all adult content. So a couple of other final considerations. So as I mentioned, the rules didn't become final until yesterday because of the expansive reach. It's taken us a little bit to kind of digest the rules, figure out what the implications are, really start thinking through what we're looking at. Also, very mindful of the fact that in May, the Watauga-Prattville library system voted for similar rules. There are some differences, but they were sued to say that the rules violated the First and 14th Amendments, and that lawsuit continues. So again, as a board, we're mindful of the fact that we want to be wise in how we approach this to not instantly expose our library system to litigation and additional costs. So we'll continue to work through that. So next steps. Our governance committee will continue to work through all the considerations as well as the implications, figure out as we get more guidance on the rules, what some of these provisions mean, what they don't mean. In some, the clear language is pretty, we can understand what the implications are that there as well. So we remain mindful of the deadlines that have been shared and the implications for our budget. So with that, do the board members have any questions?
No, thanks, Melissa. That was great. If you want to sit back down, we can always scroll through those if we need to. So I know I have many thoughts, but before I dominate the time, does anybody else have any initial comments? Any of the other board members have any initial comments about the rules?
One other thing that I didn't see at the end, you mentioned the litigation that's happening at the Watauga-Prattville. I know, I think it's Ozark Dale Library right now, they're closing this week to try and shift some things around in their collection. Right now, it just said close indefinitely. So the library is just closed and no one has access to it. So that's something else that we want to avoid if at all possible, while we try to figure out and navigate what to do with the new laws.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just going to, I apologize if this is stream of consciousness, but that's probably what it's going to be. And then, feel free to interrupt and make comments. There are a couple of challenges that the new rules present. Obscenity and sexually explicit materials, those are not challenges because we can rely on definitions in the Alabama Code, the Anti-Obscenity Act, as to what those things mean. Now, it also has a definition of harmful to minors, which is more narrow than what the HMPLC rules say, which is inappropriate for children or youth. So that becomes difficult to define what that means. Harmful to minors in the Alabama Code is really tied to prurient interest, right? Matters involving something that's sexually explicit. This is much broader than that, so we have to figure out how to work around that. I'm concerned about the impact this will have on our smaller branches. We are the largest, and this is for everybody's edification, we're the largest library system in the state. We have 10 branches. We're the busiest library system in the state. 6 of those branches are one-room buildings. So where we can block things off in downtown and South Huntsville and north to an extent, and the smaller branches that serve the smaller communities for the people that probably need the library the most, that's gonna be a challenge. So I went out a couple weekends ago and drove to New Hope, which is a beautiful little library, and then drove over to Durham. Now, they have materials separated, right? I mean, you got a children's section, you got a young adult section, you got an adult section. The problem is, if I'm staring at the children's section and I turn around, the adult section is right behind me. Because there's nowhere else, there's nowhere else to put it. And some of the buildings are so small, even if you put, and they already are kind of like this. They have children's sections in a little corner reading room there in Gurley. Another great little branch, but it's going to be a challenge. In the smaller branches, it's not where, I was talking to somebody and they said, you're going to put up shower curtains. I don't think that, I don't know if that would work. But they're so small that there's not a realistic way to erect a partition. The other thing I want to mention is I talked with librarians of both of those branches when I was visiting them, and initially they didn't know who I was, and they're already thinking, how do we adapt? How do we make changes? What do we do to try to comply with these new regulations? And obviously we're thinking about that same thing too. One of the things that you mentioned that's a particular challenge is drafting policies, because the policies have to apply to the entire system. You can't just apply to one branch or another branch. How we draft policies for downtown and for Durham, right? They're two totally different physical environments. The last thing that I'll pause and see if anybody else has any comments. With respect to the library cards, so that, and Connie or staff, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding, if we're going to comply with that new rule, we're going to have to turn off almost 24,000 children's cards, reprogram our system, and then issue new cards that are limiting an 18-year-old from checking out any material in the adult section. So, I hope that's just an unintended consequence, and maybe that gets fixed. Because I know that the APLS board is continuing to look at these things as well. So that's part of the reason. I know some people have been frustrated that they think we haven't moved fast enough. Well, that's one of the reasons. Is it's still very much in flux. And the guidance that we got from APLS on January 8th or 18th, June 18th, I'm sorry. I mean, I would say guidance is a loose word when it comes to that topic. So, just we're wrestling with it. We want to figure it out, and we want to do it the right way. But at the same time, I don't want to sacrifice our smaller branches and those populations that rely on the library, that can't run out and buy it from Barnes & Noble, that can't get it off of Amazon if they don't have it. That's not the populations that we're concerned. Those are the populations. You know what I'm saying? We're dealing with poor people who can't just run out and buy a book if they want. And if some of these regulations for us to be compliant are going to deprive them of access, I think as a board, we're not here for the state of Alabama. We're here for the Huntsville, Madison County community. And we have to hear and figure out what's best for our community. And get feedback from our community, which our community gives us quite a bit, and we appreciate that. And believe it or not, we read it all and take it very seriously. So those are just, like I said, I apologize for the stream of consciousness, and I'll probably think of another thing too. But those are some of the challenges that we've got.
Yeah, I would kind of agree. I think this policy's in flux. It just was passed yesterday. There's probably going to be changes. We've got a lot of considerations. This looks like an unfunded mandate from the state. We need to see how much it's going to cost and what disruption it's going to be to our patrons and the community. So I don't think that we need to have a knee-jerk reaction and put policies in place, so that we have a whole year to do it. And we have lawsuits that are going on that make clear a lot of this unconstitutional. So I think there's a lot of considerations that we need to take into account, and we don't need to make a rash decision just because some people are pushing this agenda.
Well, the thing too, I told you I'd have something else to say. You know, we really are constantly working on these policies. Even when we have a governance committee meeting, our committees meet every other month, like we have our library board meetings every other month. We don't wait till the meetings to send draft policies or potential language or discuss issues back and forth. You know, one or two of us are always working on something like that. With respect to the Otago-Prattville lawsuit, I've been watching that pretty closely. And so Prattville in late June, they amended their policies, and they took out language in the policy that was really directed at LGBTQ plus materials. And they amended the policy, they take that out, and then they filed a motion to dismiss on July 1st, saying, well, the policies that you sued us over aren't the same policies that we now have. Now, one of the problems, well, one of the other things is, it wasn't just the gender type language that was objected to, it was the inappropriate or harmful for minors or youth, because they allege that it's unconstitutionally vague, right? So we could go in now and adopt some language, not knowing how that's going to turn out, and the district court ruled that it's unconstitutionally vague. So that motion to dismiss is set for hearing July 30th. That doesn't mean the court will enter an order on July 30th, but we'll certainly be keeping an eye on that, because that'll give us more guidance as what we need to do, what we have to do. And I don't know, you know, the APLS isn't looking at a similar situation. They could very well end up in litigation over the policies that they adopted. So, you know, is it December 24th?
Yeah, well, he's on the 31st of 2024.
Yeah, okay, for the LS, we're very cognizant of that date. All right, we will have revised policies by that date if we can determine that those policies will still allow us to serve our community and provide the services that we traditionally provide. So that's kind of a big ticking clock in my head.
It is, yeah.
Any other thoughts or discussion?
Melissa, thank you for putting together the presentation. We're really fortunate on this board that we have 4 attorneys who are looking ahead at policies that have been passed, and we're being cautious because we don't want to jump to doing something and passing something that can then be overturned. And so I think caution is the right course. I think the way that you're staying on top of it with governance, we appreciate what you're doing.
I would say one last thing, but I don't know that it is. The other thing that we're doing, the library card issue is a perfect example, where under the letter of the rule, 18 and under cannot check a book out from the adult section. And I was talking to one of our elected representatives, and he said, all right, well, when I was a senior in high school, I did my senior book report on Winston Churchill. Could I check out Winston Churchill? I said, nope. Not the way that rule is written. And so that's another thing I know a lot of us have been doing, is working with our elected representatives and talking to them and discussing the challenges that this is facing, while recognizing the goal of, you know, keeping harmful material away from children, which every single person on this board agrees with. But things like that, maybe we can get that changed through either the legislative or the lobbying process. All of that is in flux too. So we have a lot of work the rest of the year.
And I think I was talking with Connie too, it's just, you know, the nonfiction selections and the, you know, juvenile and youth sections are not, you know, as robust as what the adult sections are. And so if you're, using my Vikings example, if you're doing a book report or a research paper on the Vikings, chances are your content is going to be in the adult sections, right? And so to think that your library staff can't help you recommend those adult books without pre-approval, or that B, you can't check them out, I fear that in a quick rush to get rules established that hasn't been thoroughly thought through, like what are the unintended consequences? You know, I use the example of if you have a young freshman who comes to Alabama A&M, comes over from Georgia or wherever, and they're trying to, you know, read Tolstoy for their freshman lit class, and they've got to, you know, write back and say, Mom, can you approve this book that I can check out from the library? I mean, that's not what I don't think anyone intended, but it's what the clear language of the rules requires.
And also, and I think we kind of touched on this, there is some very unclear language as well. And so in some places, like with this Q&A that they sent to us on June 18th, in some places it says, keep in mind the terms that your library has selected to define sexually explicit and obscene material. So, okay, so then it's our decision, you know, our definitions that we create. But then in other places it talks about like, well, you have to adhere to what the state says. And so, okay, so which way is it? So within like the same policy, they're saying like, hey, adhere towards the state, but also keep in mind your own community. And so how do we figure that out when these two things are kind of invisible?
I thought of something else. So one of the things that I know a couple of us have talked about, kind of one-offs, and I think, Melissa, this falls under governance. I'd like the governance committee to really look into and work with Connie and her staff on how it is we choose what to buy to begin with. That's directly implicated in these new rules. Right? What does that look like?
So book selection.
Right, because that's not something that the board does. We don't buy books for the library. We don't go through lists and say, get this, don't get this. That's not something that we're even familiar with. So let's start at governance, dig into that process and see if there's something there we can change from a policy standpoint that will help us as far as compliance.
And that will be kind of related to the collection development.
Exactly, yeah. And so, you know, collection development, we're going to be continuing to look at that. I mean, that's directly implicated by these. Any further discussion? I'll be done too. Melissa, thank you for all of the work that you put into that. And I've lost my head. Oh, you're right. All right, we have our executive director report from Connie. Yeah, and before you get started, Connie is serving as our interim executive director. I've had a couple of inquiries about when we're going to start the search process. We'll probably wait until the fall, you know, September timeframe, maybe early October, because our budgeting process runs on into September. And so Connie's been with the library for years. She's experienced. She's been with all the budget meetings with Cindy before Cindy retired. So we want to get through that process, see what next year looks like, as well as finish our summer programs, because our summer programs keep everybody on staff really busy as well. They've been extremely well attended this summer. So we have a lot to do, and we'll get to it, and we'll get to it in a timely manner. We'll keep everybody posted on that.
So I'm going to give the director's report on some statistics from the past couple months of May and June of this year. So we are currently at the end of summer reading, but June was our very first month of our summer reading program, which is our busiest time of the year. So as far as system circulation goes, we are doing very well. We are about 10,000 circulations ahead of last fiscal year. Our downloadables continue to be a very popular item that patrons are checking out. We are showing about 6,000 more certs than we are As far as branch circulation goes, Madison continues to lead the branches in overall circulation, and then followed by South and downtown. Monroe is also doing very well. This is a listing of all the books that we loved in May and June. So some popular authors like John Grisham and Kristen Hanna, and probably not surprising to Bridgerton fans because of the new season. We have Mr. Bridgerton has 99 checkouts. So library visitors continues to be increasing. So we have about 7,000 more visitors this year than we did last year. We do have some up and downs in our program attendance, but I think some of our branches can say that they have just enough patrons attending their programs. We have very full rooms at branches like South and North right now, as well as Madison.
Connie, I had noticed that. Sorry, I'm going to change space. And it looked to me like we just had a couple of months in 24, like January, March, and June was down a little bit. Is it a lack of programming in January and March, or
Well, January we had to freeze, so we lost an entire week of program stats for that week since we weren't been over it. So that was a big impact on us as well. And I think actually the summers are just a lot more traveling in the community too. People are leaving and going out of town, so that also impacted us.
Thank you.
As far as visitor stats go for branches, South Huntsville is the leader there, followed by downtown and Madison, and North Huntsville also is having good visitor stats. So some of the highlights from the first month of summer reading, our highest attendance program was Russell Davis Magic Show. So as you can see, South Huntsville Library packed the room with 282 attendees. We had 8 summer reading kickoff parties across the system, and it was about 988 attendees were total there. And then in June 2024, we had our highest visitor count since 2019 at 126,000 system-wide. So I wanted to share some strategic plan highlights as well. So a big part of our summer reading program is partnerships, and that has been one of our strategic plan goals is to really nurture the partnerships we have in the community. And I'll talk about that real quick before I go back to the downtown slides. But with that, we partnered with the following: with Huntsville Community Drumline. We partnered with them for the North Huntsville Library kickoff. They're a really large group at that branch. Jessica Canuta with WHMT Weather Team has been visiting several of our branches and doing a meteorology program. We also have had visits from Rise Raptor. They've been a community partner for a number of years. NASA has been a very popular visitor for the past couple of years. And then Beth Gerard with Tim Ford State Park has brought a lot of reptiles and animal skulls, and the children have really enjoyed that. Alabama Youth Ballet was part of the kickoff at the South Huntsville Library, which was also a very large crowd again. And a very popular community partner is our Therapy Partners program, where they bring their animal team in and visit with the children. So some additional strategic plan updates are our North Huntsville Library is hosting a program next Monday. It's their Rec and Read. It's our 3rd year with partnering with Huntsville Parks and Rec. And our Ready Reader Libraries are part of our outreach program. Do a story time for about an hour. And then there's water play for the kids at the Robert Shirley Legacy Center. So it's a very popular program that we've had for years now. And another way that we're connecting with our community is working with the Transportation Department with the City of Huntsville. They've added a new bus stop to North Huntsville. So that is right in front of the library, and it is on Route 9 with the Oakwood stop. Another upcoming program that's a partnership is with the Orion Amphitheater, and it is Here to Be Seen. So this is an opportunity for us to promote our Blast Music artists. That's our digital music software that we have through our website, and it promotes all our local talent. And then we're also partnering with photographer Shendrick Pelt, who's going to be putting some images on display in a gallery at the amphitheater. And our hope is that we can also take those images and take them around the community at other sites too, so we can draw in more attention to the talent that we have locally. Let me speak up here real quick and talk about downtown library updates. So, downtown library has been in need of an update for quite a while. We're 37 years old in this building, and so far we have had digital mapping done in our facility with KPS Group Architects and also an engineering review. We also just had a survey that we had select staff complete, talking about different functions and their usage of the branch. And starting tomorrow, we will have a work session with select staff from different departments to interview them and discuss the findings from those surveys. And then on Thursday, we'll be having a work session with the City of Huntsville staff, KPS, and library administration to discuss all the findings from the mapping and the survey results. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Connie?
On the downtown, with that, I mean, what's the timeline?
So they haven't given us a distinct timeline yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now, I mean, we're pretty much going full speed ahead. We've had a lot of progress in the past 2 months, but no timeline yet. I think the next thing after the work session on Thursday is probably more community input. That'll be the next step.
All right. Thanks, Connie. All right, that concludes what I think of as the business part of the meeting. We're at public comments. Reverend Carrie Cobb. Is Reverend Cobb here? Okay. Stacy Rickle.
I've not been to a library board meeting before, so, I'm Stacey Griffin, I live in Madison. I consider myself a power user of the library. I believe in the library, I'm here for the library. I don't, envy the job you guys have. A thing that I feel like could get lost in the, I keep hearing how, like, it's a challenge and it's hard and, this is not what I prepared to say, but one of the things I keep hearing is like the effect of 20,000 kid library cards. And it just, I'm sitting here going, okay, during COVID, we figured out how to hang virtual school. Huh? Virtual school? No, we figured out how to hang plastic sheets around everything and make everybody safe during COVID. Why can we not? Those teams that determine what books, what things come into the library, why can we not mark them as questionable if they're questionable? And then let mom or dad decide, is that questionable to my family or not? And instead of turning over the whole library system to abide by these rules, but I know that you don't know what the rules are yet. Like they're telling you these are the rules, you're holding loose. So I get where you are. What I came to say is what I don't understand. We don't feed babies tortilla chips. We don't let toddlers cross the street alone. We don't let our 12-year-olds drive. Like, we know that there's a concept of things being developmentally appropriate. So we don't do these things to take away rights to these kids. We're trying to keep them safe. I don't think that one of you sitting in this room wants to inflict harm on another kid, be they 5 or 3. But we also know as adults, we have a responsibility to the young people in our circles. We have a responsibility to protect them until they're capable of making decisions about what they read or watch or eat. So nothing I've heard has told me y'all would do this, but I'm just saying we have a job as adults to stand in the gap for the kids in our libraries. I know it's mom and dad's ultimate job, but if we're not partnering with the fellow moms and dads, for the library to be a place where they can go in and they can, I'm at Madison and I call them the book troughs. I don't know if that's a technical term, but I love that as kids, my kids could just dig through them and I never had to question it. I think there's a way to do it, and I think y'all have a big job in front of you, but I think it's very doable once they give you some rules.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle. Dr. Allison?
Now, so yesterday, the state of Alabama, as we have seen, took a step backwards by allowing these administrative code changes that much of Alabama has been fighting back against to go into effect, ushering in censorship and violations of First Amendment rights in libraries across our state. We appreciate the efforts that you all have made to protect intellectual freedom and the freedom to read for all of the patrons by adopting the policies that you have already put into place. We believe that those policies largely meet the letter of the admin code changes, and my hope is that the library board will advocate as such in your communications to the HMPLS and the presentation that you all have before that becomes the case. As Kevin already said, the terms obscene and sexually explicit are terms that are defined in state legal code, as you all know, and our library has neither in the children's and young adult section. Given these changes, however, my hope is that the leadership of the library will commit to the transparency and actions the library is taking, as you have done today. In regards to that, now that we know that the library is being given statements of concern to reconsider materials, and that materials are being moved, I kindly request that you all consider making these requests and decisions made by the library part of the public record and included in the board packets, as well as being included in the director's report, possibly at each board meeting. Finally, I would like to spend my last minute of time speaking, I think a bit about the moment that we are in, because we've been through a lot together, I feel like, in the past year. And I just want to kind of zoom out to see the forest through the trees. In my profession, I'm a sociologist, that's part of what we do. I would say that this is an unprecedented time, but that simply is not true. Censorship and book banning has consistently been part of the American story, from the anti-literacy laws during slavery and Jim Crow laws that segregated libraries, banning of books about evolution, books about communism during the McCarthy era, to books about critical race theory and the backlash to George Floyd's murder in 2020, the moral panic that we're in right now against LGBTQ-themed books in our current moment. As the National Council of Teachers on English has argued, censorship creates an experience, quote, hostile to critical inquiry and dialogue. If we want to protect democracy and the freedom to read, then censorship of any kind undermines this goal. What historical research into censorship and book bans has consistently shown us is that they are the canary in the coal mine for attempts to destabilize our democracy, as well as to destabilize this vital public institution. So I thank the board for your time and encourage you all to stand strong.
Thanks, Dr. Allison.
Supporting me.
Before our next speaker comes up, and Ms. Jones, that's going to be you. Let's get governance and more homework and look at. So one of the problems with making a statement of concern, or not a problem, it's an issue. You know, we have to maintain confidentiality with respect to library records. And let's have the committee look at a way to make the decisions available, but make sure any kind of personal information is redacted out, if that's doable. Okay, Ms. Jones?
Thank you. So always I'm really good on docket for you guys to review. I will assume you've already made your decision, but no, I'll try to split it either way.
We have not.
Oh, okay, well, good. Gives me an opportunity. So the book is a very tragic book. The author is a very unique individual, and I sent you all an email. He also has another book titled We Are Not Broken. It's a really good book. It's very similar to All Boys Aren't Blue. It's just got a little different spin on the parts of his life that he focuses on. All Boys Aren't Blue, like I said, is a very tragic book in the sense that it fully depicts this minor at the time being raped by us. That's not normal. We don't need to normalize that. We do not need to teach children that sex is viewed as consensual and adults just get to take you for however, whatever that they want, and you just more or less sit down and shut up. We do not want our children having that message. I think we can all agree on that. there are more and more and more studies and research coming out that exposure to these topics to children is irreparable harm. They do not recover from this. I read a research on it earlier today, and it talks about the younger the child is when they're exposed to this, the more long-term harm it does. It has issues in terms of driving children to pornography because it puts the idea of sex in their minds, and then they're curious, and then they go seek it out everywhere else, and they porn, and then you progress from there in terms of the level of severity of that. If you're not familiar with Lily Cole, I encourage you to go read her story. She is a young girl that, born a girl, at some point transitioned to a boy, and it all goes back to, born girl, transitioned to a boy, boy, back to girl, she says it all goes back to exposure to pornography. That's what set her down this path. So when I say these books, this access to whatever, it does irreparable damage, it does. This young woman who may not have kids, she doesn't have breast anymore, she will never understand what it is to breastfeed her child. That is damaging. So yes, these things cost money. It costs money to redo these parts, I get that. But you need to consider the cost of not doing this. What is it going to cost our community if we do not stand up and protect our children? For the love of God, all you have to do is move books and have parents make those decisions for their kids. We're not trying to remove anyone from society. We want to protect the most vulnerable people that we have in our lives.
Michael Shelton.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you very much for letting me speak. And I know that you have a daunting task calling new rules, so we're full for you. Hope we do the right thing. My name is Michael Shelton. I live in Athens. My address is 17800 Remington Drive, 35611. I'm a retired naval aviator. I'm also co-lead on the North Alabama chapter of the John Birch Society. I've got 4 grandchildren, 3 of them are girls. I support the First Amendment for everyone, including those I disagree with. That's the beauty of the public square. Each of us has a right to his or her thoughts and opinions, but what we do not have a right to is to harm a child. That's why we're a republic, not a democracy. A constitutional republic has guardrails. About 12 years ago, we saw a report that the ACLU was suing the library for not allowing access to online porn in the library. The ACLU boils down to the First Amendment free speech issue. Adults should have full access to the internet and no filters. Public library are publicly funded, so should it be okay? But the library would use deference, which is a yielding of judgment and preference from respect to other people's opinions. This is a positive virtue of self-limitation of freedom. Knowing when to exercise liberties that do not harm or offend others, we call common sense and common courtesy. The teaching of sexual things to our kids is the sole prerogative of parents, not the state, not the public schools, not the various state and national library associations. One of your books that I looked up, and it's available in the juvenile section in Madison and Hazel Green, and in the young adult in Monrovia, is perfectly normal. That book on the cover says that it's okay for 10 years and above. 10 years and above, and it's graphically sexual. It is gross. It is really, really, it shows sexual scenes of homosexual and heterosexual couples having sex. It's targeted 10 years and above. Alabama law has specific language to protect minors below 19 years old, and to keep graphic and harmful, explicit sexual imagery away from minors. In 3 of the Gospels of the New Testament, Jesus mentioned the stomach of a child. He said in Matthew 18, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who's believed in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and be drowned in the depth of the sea. Our Constitution, by John Adams, he said that it was made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Remember, we're a hostage republic, not a democracy. Thank you for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. Susan Stewart?
Hey, Susan Stewart from Huntsville. My comments gonna be a little disjointed, sorry. I'm just hearing so many things and things. Thank you very much for the opportunity you've given me over the last year to speak here several times. I appreciate it. With that, I mainly came here to wish you luck and to support you as you try to navigate the road ahead with these new amendments to the Alabama Code governing libraries. The policies that we've recently adopted here at HMPLC, they do align, I believe, with the letter of the new rules. There's things in addition to that, like the advanced improvement problems and the children's spaces and the minors' cards that are going to take a lot of resources and consideration to figure that out, that were not well thought out, as we've all seen. But our library already does not put sexual material in the children's section. Our librarians already deem what is appropriate for the children's and all other sections based on their professional standards. And our library, as we are about to see, has a robust process for considering books of concern, reconsidering books of concern. And I want to remember that, Nancy Pack was reported, she sent guidance to all the libraries. That was reported in the Alabama Political Reporter on June 19th, that it's the individual library boards and libraries and our community standards, they are not deciding, the APLS does not decide what is inappropriate or appropriate. And I hope that any necessary transitions are going to be as smooth as possible for patrons with minimal disruption to library services, especially as the school year gets underway when seeking to comply with the changes to library cards for minors. I don't think it would be out of line to talk to your legislators about this. Usually when there are new rules put in place with laws, there's a financial impact statement that comes along with those things, and no thought was given to any of that, what this would do to our libraries. I actually was at the meeting where the extra amendments were proposed and passed with one board member there not even able to read them before they were passed. And I heard one of the people in the committee that was meeting to add these things say, oh, but parents can just go out and buy books if they want to that aren't in the library. They really, really haven't thought about the people that the library serves. I want to put House Bill 4 on your radar. It's been pre-filed for the 2025 legislative session, a reboot of HB 385, which failed to pass this year. As before, it expands the definition of obscenity and it threatens librarians with jail. It's not too early to start talking to local legislators about that. But mainly, thank you for your thoughtful and measured response today and over the last year to what is a national strategy to promote an agenda of intolerance. And thank you to the librarians who, in the face of attacks on their character and expertise, have put their heads down and continue to do their jobs.
Thank you. Ms. Gallo?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all again. My name is Carissa Callan. I'm still a patron of the library because I love the library. I want to see the library succeed and I want to see it do well. And I'm glad that you are taking all of this into consideration and that you're going to look at what HMPLC has put out. And I do wish it was clearer too. I wish that certain things were not going to be so complicated. But I want to encourage you with some language that our homeschool cover uses for their high school students. They encourage the students to do hard things. Sometimes doing the hard thing is the right thing. And it may not be easy and it may not be complicated. But you have a room full of volunteers here who can help shelve books and do some of the mundane things so that staffers can work on library cards or other stuff. Friends of the library, I'm sure they'll be happy to help out. I'll be happy to help out. We want to help you succeed. Sometimes doing the hard thing takes time, takes effort. They also say trust the librarians. I did. I used to and I did. And last September, your executive director librarian wanted to make a change, wanted to move books that had sexual content to the adult section, which is all that I've ever asked for either. I don't want people to have to go out and buy Naked, Not Your Average Sex Encyclopedia if they want to show that to their children. But that could be in the adult section. I trusted the librarian, and then I'm not even sure what really happened, but it got rescinded, it got pulled back. And here we are 9 months later, The last board meeting, you said you would make it easier for patrons to get the online form, and you did, and thank you very much. The latest wrinkle in that process, however, is what I learned yesterday, that a different statement of concern form is going to be required for each copy of the book at a different branch. That is what I heard from the Gurley branch librarian, I forgot to write her name down, that spoke with you, Mrs. Chow. So that means if there is 4 different copies at 4 different branches, that I have to submit a statement of concern 4 times. So if I can only do 3 in a calendar year, my clarifying question is that 3 copies or 3 statements of concern period, or 3 different books? So if I have to submit it to the Gurley branch, the South Pencil branch, the Madison branch, and Monrovia, that's 4.
Go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, that's both inefficient and shows a lack of cohesiveness across your 10 branches. For cohesiveness, you did say that your policy does apply to everyone. So if Gurley's going to review it, Madison's going to review it, are they going to have separate review committees? How's that going to work? That doesn't seem effective. Really quickly, your policy states that parents have to stay with minors. Also, the way I read it is that it's under 18 for the library cards, not 18. So if there's a college student, even 17 or 18, they can go to a college library, and hey, you know underage kids get beer. Everybody's got a friend that can go in and check out the book. I do wish that it wasn't that way for children who want to do nonfiction research, but it's more important to protect the kids. Thank you.
So we don't normally respond during public comments, but I want to clear something up that I think there's a misunderstanding about. The state, so if it's the same edition of a book, and we have 4 copies of it in different branches, one statement of concern covers that edition. Many of our books are multi-edition works that have been around for a long time and that have changed over time. And so one of the things that we're working on is making sure that if there's a statement of concern, it covers the current edition of the book as well as any other editions that have the same content. Right? So I think that's a little bit of a misunderstanding. That's not how that's going to work. All right, I apologize. Dr. Netwood?
I thank y'all all for being here and for doing the job you do, because I know how well nonprofit board members are paid. So, in a nation that prides itself on liberty, it's crucial that we protect the right for all to read broadly and freely. We live in a melting pot, a nation of varied cultures, beliefs, identities, and perspectives. Diversity is our strength. Just as we don't restrict grocery stores to only stock items that cater to preferences of specific groups, we shouldn't limit the range of books available to our children based on the preferences of specific groups. Freedom of reading choices enriches the lives of children and our society. It exposes us to different viewpoints, fosters empathy, and promotes critical thinking. When we encounter books that challenge our perspectives and beliefs, we grow. It's through this process that all, both young and old, become better informed and more compassionate citizens. Parents who have concerns about the books their children encounter should play an active role. It is that parent's responsibility to accompany their children to the library, guide their children's choices, and discuss the content. This is what parenting is about. However, this guidance should not translate into limiting availability of books for other children. A free country thrives on the free exchange of ideas. Limiting book choices is a leap into censorship, and history has shown us the dangers of this path. When books are censored, we silence voices of stories that need to be heard, limit the exchange of information, ideas, and identities. And we lose the opportunity to learn from the past, understand different cultures, and envision diverse futures. By maintaining a broad spectrum of books, we honor the principles of liberty and democracy. We ensure that our libraries remain places of discovery, learning, and growth for everyone. Those with specific requirements for children can and should assist in making suitable choices, but this must not be done restricting the freedom of others. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our public comments. give us just a moment as we get ready to take up the first appeal from a statement of concern decision by a committee. Okay, so understand that this is our first time to take up a review of a committee decision of a statement of concern. We've had a number of, we've had some books go through the statement of concern process. I know some of those books were recommended to be relocated to the adult section, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. We have a number of statements of concern coming through the system, I think 14 at this point. So we want to have a robust discussion around the issues raised in the statement of concern. And again, legally, we have to maintain confidentiality with respect to circulation records. So I know we all, what we'll do is Connie will present the statement of concern and the committee decision, and then we'll open it up for discussion, because I know a number of us read the book that was the subject of this particular statement.
Right, so the title is All Boys Aren't Blue, type of library material book, author George M. Johnson, copyright 2020. What harm do you feel this material might cause? The content of this book is extremely graphic and normalizes sex at a young age, prior to a child understanding the terms of consent. This book is harmful for young adolescent minds who are not fully developed to understand the concept of consenting to sexual activities versus rape. Did you complete the entire item? Yes. Is there anything worthwhile in this material? No. I did not find anything worthwhile in this book, nor do I know anyone that did. Have you read any professional reviews of this item? No. What do you believe are the main ideas of this material? To share the author's experiences with sex from childhood into adulthood. What do you think was the writer's intention in creating this work? I think this book was more about therapy for a hurt and damaged person than anything else. This book contains extremely traumatic details that shouldn't be shared freely with underage children. What material with a similar purpose would you suggest as a replacement for this item? Nothing. The library shouldn't be housing content that could easily inflict trauma or confusion onto young and impressionable minds. So I'm going to read the response from the committee. Thank you for taking the time to complete our statement of concern form regarding All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. As our policy dictates, I appointed a committee to review the book and make a recommendation. 2 of the committee members are parents with grown children, 1 with grandchildren. The other committee member is a foster parent of teenagers. I believe they are well equipped to evaluate the book in question. They unanimously agree that the book should remain in the library and stay in the young adult collection for the following reasons. 1, while the book is frank and open, the content is relevant to the author's history. 2, there are strong themes of loving family connection and communication struggles. 3, it would do more of a disservice to remove it from the collection, as it would neglect to consider the real-world issues of sex and sexual abuse that some teenagers may already be experiencing.
All right, thanks, Connie. We'll open it up for any discussion. I know, like I said, I know some of us read the book. Anybody want to make any comments about that?
Well, I have a question first, a clarifying question in regards to our policy. Are we supposed to restrict our comments and our thoughts to just these 2 documents, or are we allowed to, like, for instance, the statement of concern kind of asks, like, did you read any reviews? Are we allowed to?
Oh yeah, no, and that's, thanks for bringing that up, GW. I mean, we don't have a strict written policy of how the board approaches a review. And so I read the book, and then I researched the author, and then I read some other things that I found. So, you know, I don't see any problem with that. And if something, outside of just the book, influenced you, or you found helpful, or you found telling, I mean, by all means, let's talk about it.
I would say, to kind of echo that, if the decision has to be binding for 3 years, I think it needs to be broad enough to, anything that we might address. I mean, if our decision is binding for 3 years, I think it's kind of a wide open review.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to clarify, my understanding is that the statement of concern wasn't requesting that the material be removed from the collection. It was that the material be moved from the young adult to the adult section. So at the end of the day, that's what we'll be deciding, whether it stays in the young adult section or whether it goes to the adult section.
I'll jump in. So I also read the book, and I, unlike the applicant, I did find things that were worthwhile in the book. It was a perspective of someone who, is kind of addressing what it feels like to feel different, and all of the implications regarding that. Having said that, for me, I felt that the graphic nature of some of the sexual experiences he detailed from his college days when he was an adult would not be appropriate in that 13 to 18-year-old section. I think that's one of the challenges, is our young adult section is 13 to 18. And so if you think about content appropriateness, for me, I think it's appropriate to be in the library. I think it does have value, but I would put it in the adult section.
Any other comments, thoughts?
Well, I read the book, and again, unlike the whoever submitted the statement of concern, I did find things worthwhile. The book, in the author's words, is really, it's a memoir of his own historical experiences, and how it relates to him as being queer, but in large part also to him being an African American. And so I know this person stated that they didn't see anything worthwhile, and they don't know anyone who would see it as worthwhile. But man, so many of his experiences were mine. Honestly, I may not identify as queer, but I am an African American, and so him talking about growing up with cousins, and talking about his name, actually. So I go by GW, but GW is not my name. And so he spent, I think, a chapter talking about how his name kind of changed in a sense. And we're going through that with my son, because we called him like a moniker of his middle name. And so I found that conversation fascinating. And the content that is really under question starts on page 201. And so there's 200 pages that you kind of have to get through, listen to, and to be honest, I was reading and I was like, okay, when am I going to actually see something that could be considered truly objectionable? And so I think there's a lot to the book other than what's highlighted. And I've met with some folks and I've read some reviews, and I really, really understand the concern. And in some ways I agree with it. But
I'll give you 1 minute.
Yeah, no, I think I'm trying to decide if it's my next thing. Probably should have talked with you before. What the heck? I'll get paid. I'll try to be okay.
Well, and one thing, I did send an email around, kind of laying out the agenda and what we were going to do, and I asked everybody to speak their mind and vote their conscience.
Yeah. So I'll say this. Something that I do when I'm trying to come up with a decision, I go to a book that I read often, to advisor. And so, love Proverbs, I love wisdom. So I read through some Proverbs last night, and I actually went to a book that, a passage that I find it fascinating. It's actually my favorite story. It's a really strange story. But as I was reading it, and it's a passage of Judges, but as I was reading it, I realized, man, somebody could absolutely write a statement of concern about this passage. And it's my favorite passage. I won't detail it now because I'm probably taking up too much time. But it's a really fascinating passage, and I know for a fact it's graphic. But at the end of the passage, it states, in those days Israel had no king, and everyone did what they felt was right. They wanted to, and in doing that, they were causing harm to a bunch of different people, and so they didn't have a guiding principle. And so I got really invested in the book, and then tried to take myself out of it to see, is there a guiding principle in the book? One maybe that I haven't experienced or have experienced or agree with or don't agree with. And when I consider it as a whole, the same way that I consider that book that I was reading last night as a whole, man, it's so good. That book that I was reading, I think that it's a good thing. And if I were to put a microscope on that one piece, maybe not, but I just wanted to talk through some of the things that I kind of considered as I was reading that book. And I think that it would be a shame if we only read the highlights of the passages that we disagreed with and didn't also consider the passages that weren't considered questionable. That being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should vote one way or the other, or we should vote one way or the other on that. But I think having the mindset of being careful, being thoughtful, and actually getting into details, and listening to people, and meeting with people, and understanding where people are coming from, understanding where the author is coming from, understanding where the statement of concern is coming from, understanding where the folks that viewed it are coming from. And I try to really understand their point of view as well as the statement of concern. And I think I got a decent, it actually made it harder for me in terms of how to think about this. And so even throughout the day, I've been trying to decide how I might vote on something like this. But I didn't want to be cornered into it is a binary decision, but I don't want to feel like it's binary. Because, for instance, I want us to call balls and strikes. I want us to do the right thing by our community and by the state. And so I just wanted to, and I'm sorry for taking so long, but I just want us to care and to not broad stroke anyone or broad brush anyone, whether it be the statement of concern or the folks that evaluated the report I'm on. So that's all I have to say.
Well, other board members take note, because that's how you deal with a statement of concern. Thank you, that was interesting. Anybody else have any thoughts that they'd like to share about the book?
I can go next. I did read the book, and I researched reviews of the book, researched the author, watched an interview with the author. And one of the things that I kept reading about why this particular book was recommended for the young adult section and why the publisher recommended it for young adult is because these events happened to him as a young adult. And it was offering a story of what could happen and how somebody could come out of that situation as a young adult. And as we look at our own procurement policies, I think we have to, first of all, question the section that publishers are necessarily putting certain books in, because I don't think we can just rely upon that when we're trying to make decisions for our own community. This was a difficult decision and a TV option given for this book. It has been acclaimed, and so I could see how whoever was purchasing it at that time would have read those reviews and thought this is something that we should have in the library. But when I also think about reading books that were in the young adult section to my own child in elementary school, and I think about what someone could come across who was unaware and of a young age. And we have some elementary kids who read young adult literature. I don't think that it should stay in the young adult section. And while I appreciate and if anyone ever in the future gets called upon to serve on these types of review committees, I very much appreciate this perspective. It was not dismissed in my mind easily. And I had to look at a lot of different resources to come to my conclusions. But I think I would vote to reverse this decision and move it up.
Doug, Brad? You don't have to comment. So I read the book as well, and to echo everyone else, you know, I did see value. There's descriptions of family. There's, you know, childhood struggle, dealing with school. I mean, just all kinds of things that children deal with. And so I did see value there. But I think I came down where you did, Melissa, with the descriptions, you know, in college and on, that they're just very bad. But I also take to heart very much what you said, GW, and it is a struggle. One of the problems that we are dealing with is the young adult section, because the young adult section is 18 to 13, and there is a vast difference between an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old. If we were talking about a section where a person could drive themselves to the library and check out a book, from 16 to 18, I would say it stays in that section, but that's not how any library is organized at this point. So, you know, unless anybody, Carl, I'm sorry, I skipped right over you. Do you have anything you'd like to add or say? Okay. So, trying to decide how we do this vote. Is anyone opposed to doing it openly? Does anyone want a secret ballot? Okay. So the decision is whether it stays in young adult or whether it gets moved to adult. And if y'all are okay with it, we'll just pull the board, and that will be the decision of the board. And it's a majority. Okay, this does not have to be unanimous. It probably shouldn't be unanimous. None of these decisions should be, nor should they be easy. So I'm going to start with you, Doug.
I would support the committee's decision.
To leave it, yes. Okay. Renee?
I would reverse the decision and move it up.
As I indicated, I would move it up to the adult section as well.
I would reverse the committee's decision and move it up.
GW? Support the committee's decision. Brad? Support the committee's decision. Carla?
Same.
Support? All right. So for supporting the committee's decision, for moving it so it stays in the young adult section. And I really appreciate everybody that made comments. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and all the work that went into this. So is there any other business that needs to come before the board? If not, our next meeting date is September the 17th at 4 p.m. It will be in the downtown library, but it won't be in this room. So we will let people know where it's going to be when we know where it's going to be. All right? We'll stand adjourned. Thank you.